Let's get right into it. Welcome to the Explainer. Meta is actually removing Horizon Worlds from every single VR headset. Think about that for a second. After spending more money than the entire GDP of Iceland on their Metaverse division, the flagship virtual world is being shut down inside the very headsets it was literally built for. Now, sure, it's going to live on in mobile apps and browsers, but in VR, the whole point of the thing, that ends in June 2026. So we really got to ask, where on earth did $83 billion actually go? Before we dive into those crazy financial numbers, I want to address this viewer question because it really hits the nail on the head and sets up exactly what went wrong. The difference between Horizon Worlds and something like VRChat, honestly, it's night and day. It was this massive culture clash. Horizon felt like you were wandering around a highly sanitized, ridiculously expensive corporate lobby. It totally lacked that organic, wild, user-driven weirdness that actually makes platforms like VRChat so fun and sticky. And when we talk about the money involved here, look at this number, $83.6 billion. That is the total operating loss from Meta's Reality Labs division just from 2020 through the first quarter of 2026. To put that completely wild number into perspective for you, that is more than the entire budget of NASA over 5 years. And despite that mountain of cash, their flagship software is being unceremoniously killed off inside the very headsets they heavily subsidize to run it. Section 1. Scene of the crime. Shutting down Horizon VR. The timeline for this shutdown early next year is incredibly fast. It kicked off on March 17th when they announced the pivot to a mobile-first, browser-based experience. Then, boom, just a week later on March 24th, the spatial hyperscape capture features were gone. By March 31st, the app and all its events were completely scrubbed from the Quest Store. And the absolute final nail in the coffin? June 15th, 2026. After that, immersive VR access to Horizon Worlds is gone for good. Now, okay, there is one highly specific exception here, which Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth pointed out. Older worlds built on the Unity engine, they're basically being frozen in amber. They won't work on the new mobile app, and they aren't getting any new features. They're just being put on life support, which essentially turns the VR version of Horizon into this weird digital museum for legacy users. Meanwhile, all the new development is being aggressively funneled into their proprietary Horizon engine, which is strictly optimized for your phone. Let's move on to Section 2, Cause of Death, the Honest Autopsy. Getting back to our viewer's question, you really have to contrast Meta's failure with the industry's actual success stories. On one hand, you've got Horizon Worlds, this rigid, closed corporate ecosystem that famously made users float around as torsos without legs for years. Like literally a multi-billion-dollar joke. But then look at VRChat. It thrives on community modding. There are zero avatar restrictions. You can be whatever you want. And the result? Consumers absolutely chose creative freedom over corporate sanitation, pushing VRChat to a massive 149,000 concurrent users. And honestly, Meta's own internal data knew this. Leaked documents showed that most people just never came back after their first month. One internal report bluntly admitted, "An empty world is a sad world." There were even reports that Meta's own employees weren't using it. Because here's the fundamental truth about spatial computing. It doesn't matter if you spend billions building a 3D space. If nobody actually wants to hang out there, it's not a social network. Right? Let's get into Section 3, the estate, where Meta's $83 billion actually went. So if we step back and reframe that massive Reality Labs loss, we find that a huge chunk of it was actually essential research and development. That money heavily subsidized the Quest 1, 2, 3, and Pro headsets. It bought up top-tier VR studios like Supernatural, Armature, and Sanzero. But maybe most importantly, it funded major core technological breakthroughs. We're talking high-res displays, neural interfaces, haptics, and that incredible color pass-through. So yes, this specific Horizon Worlds VR software failed, but the underlying hardware infrastructure they built with that $83 billion, it's genuinely excellent. But man, realizing your software strategy is completely wrong after burning through tens of billions of dollars, that comes with a very real, very severe human cost. With Quest sales dropping in 2025 and investors getting antsy, Meta had to slam on the brakes, cutting Reality Labs spending by up to 30%. That meant a 10% workforce reduction right there in the division. Over 1,000 incredibly skilled VR developers lost their jobs, and Meta completely shuttered 3 of its premier VR gaming studios. It's just a brutally harsh market correction for the whole VR industry. Section 4, Rebirth, the Pivot to Wearables. This internal memo from Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth pretty much spells out the entire future. Meta is officially pivoting away from those fully immersive virtual worlds. Instead, they are pouring all their resources into delivering what he calls category-defining AI devices. The whole paradigm is shifting. It's no longer about putting on a headset to escape into some digital universe. It's about bringing a personal superintelligence with you into your everyday physical world. Because frankly, the market has completely spoken. In 2025, sales for bulky VR headsets like the Quest dropped by 16%. The super premium Apple Vision Pro, its sales absolutely plunged by 95%. But on the flip side, Meta's Ray-Ban AI smart glasses, they saw a massive 200% explosion in revenue growth. Consumers are making it very clear. They don't want heavy escape pods strapped to their faces. They are voting with their wallets for lightweight, stylish glasses that just happen to have incredibly smart AI built right in. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, here is exactly where Meta is heading. Everything is now centered around deeply integrating the Meta AI assistant into a growing lineup of Ray-Ban smart glasses and wearable displays. The Horizon brand isn't entirely dead, but it's moving fully over to mobile phones to try and battle it out with Roblox for that younger audience. And hey, for the VR gamers out there, don't worry too much. Meta absolutely isn't abandoning VR entirely. They're going to keep supporting and updating Quest hardware, just specifically as a dedicated gaming platform.
So at the end of the day, that grand metaverse Mark Zuckerberg pitched to us half a decade ago, it simply doesn't exist. What does exist is a genuinely fantastic piece of hardware in the Quest 3, built on the back of an $83 billion infrastructure. The whole story is messy and complicated, and it leaves us with one incredibly huge question. If a historic $83 billion investment couldn't force a VR metaverse into the mainstream, will lightweight AI glasses finally be the magic key for spatial computing? Or, are we just watching the very beginning of another phenomenally expensive experiment? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I'll see you in the next one.